The sprawling mansion at the edge of the city gleamed under the afternoon sun, marble floors polished so perfectly that they reflected light like mirrors. It was the home of Gregory Alcott, a self-made millionaire in the eyes of the world, a man celebrated in magazines for his business acumen, luxury cars, and high society parties. His photographs, often accompanied by a glamorous companion on his arm, decorated the glossy pages of financial and lifestyle columns. Yet, behind the cameras and carefully crafted appearances, the story was far less perfect. His wife Elena lived in that same mansion, yet her life was far removed from the golden image painted in public. Where the world saw Gregory as a charmer, she saw a man intoxicated with his own reflection. Their marriage, once full of youthful promises, had crumbled into cold silences and sharp arguments. Elena was pregnant now, a fact that should have brought them closer, but instead it had widened the rift between them. Gregory's obsession with appearances meant that her vulnerability was an inconvenience, her expanding belly a burden rather than a blessing. One evening, Elena sat quietly in the nursery she had begun to prepare. Soft white curtains fluttered gently against the open window, and a cradle sat in the center of the room, untouched but waiting. She ran her hand along its smooth wooden edge, imagining the tiny life that would soon fill it. Tears pricked her eyes, not from joy alone, but from the ache of being so desperately alone during what should have been the most beautiful chapter of her life. Her loneliness soon found its explanation. Gregory's absences grew longer, his excuses thinner. "Business trip," he would say, or networking dinner. But whispers in the city traveled quickly. Elena began to hear murmurs about an actress, a rising starlet with fiery red hair and a smile crafted for seduction. Photographs surfaced of Gregory leaving theaters, attending premieres, caught in stolen moments that tabloids salivated over. The truth came crashing into her world like glass shattering on marble. One night, Gregory walked into the mansion with his usual air of self-importance, only this time his words were colder than ever. "I'm filing for divorce," he said flatly, his eyes meeting hers without a trace of remorse. Elena's heart clenched. "Divorce? Now, Gregory, I'm carrying your child." He didn't flinch. "I've thought it through. This marriage doesn't work. You'll be taken care of financially. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her breath caught. "Taken care of? I don't want your money, Gregory. I want the father of my child, the man I once loved." He turned away, his jaw set. "I'm in love with someone else. Her career is about to take off. She deserves to be by my side. You deserve comfort, security, but I can't give you love anymore." The words sliced deeper than any blade could. Elena wanted to scream, to demand how he could trade years of marriage, vows spoken, and the life they had built for the shallow glow of stage lights. But she didn't. Something within her shifted that night, a quiet strength she hadn't felt in years. The divorce was quick, scandalous, and brutal. Headlines feasted on the story. "Millionaire leaves pregnant wife for rising star." Paparazzi swarmed, snapping photos of Elena as she entered courtrooms, her belly rounding beneath flowing dresses. They painted her as tragic, abandoned, pitiful. But Elena, though she felt broken inside, carried herself with quiet dignity, never once allowing the cameras to see her tears. Gregory relished the attention. He flaunted his new actress love on red carpets, buying her jewelry, whisking her away to tropical vacations, living as though he had won some grand prize. To him, Elena was already part of a past he had shed like an old skin. Yet what Gregory never knew, what the world had long forgotten, was that Elena was not the fragile figure the tabloids thought her to be. She carried a secret that had remained hidden beneath years of quiet living. She was the sole heir to the powerful Reinhard steel dynasty, one of the oldest and wealthiest industrial families in the country. Her parents, fiercely private and protective, had raised her away from the glare of publicity. They taught her humility, the value of living simply, even while their empire spanned continents. When she met Gregory in her 20s, she had deliberately kept her identity concealed, yearning for love untainted by money or name. Gregory had courted her then, not knowing her background, enchanted by what he believed was just a modest woman with grace and intelligence. But as his ambition grew, he became blind to the treasure already beside him. Elena had hidden her true last name, adopting her mother's maiden name, believing she would one day reveal the truth when the time was right. But Gregory's betrayal had stolen that moment. Instead, the truth now waited like a blade, poised to strike when destiny decided it was time. Months passed. Alina gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Adrian after her grandfather, the titan who had built the Steel Dynasty from nothing. Holding Adrian in her arms, Alina knew she no longer needed Gregory. Her son became her world, her reason to rise each morning, her shield against the loneliness. Meanwhile, Gregory's perfect new life began to show cracks. The actress had sacrificed everything for was ambitious, yes, but she was also volatile. Fame brought chaos, and her hunger for the spotlight often left Gregory trailing behind her. He funded her films, showered her with gifts, but the more he gave, the more distant she became. Arguments erupted, paparazzi caught their fights, and soon the same magazines that once celebrated them began to whisper of trouble in paradise. Gregory's empire also began to falter. Business ventures he had recklessly pursued for the sake of impressing his new partner collapsed. Investors pulled away, creditors closed in. For the first time in years, the man who once stood untouchable began to feel the walls closing around him. One evening, desperate and weary, Gregory drove past the old neighborhood where he had once lived with Alina. The mansion still stood proud, lights glowing softly in the windows. Against his will, memories surged. Elena's laughter in the early years, the meals they shared, the quiet moments of comfort. And then the sharp contrast of how easily he had thrown it all away. What he didn't know was that inside that very mansion, Elena was holding a quiet gathering of her family. The Reinhardt name, the dynasty Gregory had once been blind to, was rallying around her. With Adrian in her arms, Elena was no longer just the abandoned wife of a millionaire. She was preparing to step into her rightful place as the heiress of an empire. And when she did, the world, including Gregory, would see her in a light brighter than any stage his actress could ever hope to command. And so, the stage was set. One man blinded by greed and vanity. One woman rising from heartbreak to claim her true power. And a revelation waiting to shatter the illusion of who really held wealth, strength, and dignity in their hands. The Reinhardt estate was unlike anything Gregory could have imagined. He had only glimpsed it once, years ago, when Alina took him on a brief visit under the guise of an old family friend's home. Even then, the sprawling steel and glass architecture, manicured gardens, and the quiet authority in the staff had struck him as extraordinary. But he never asked questions. At that time, Gregory had been too focused on his own rise to notice the understated wealth surrounding Alina's life. Now, months after abandoning her, he sat in his penthouse, half-empty bottles of whiskey scattered across the table, unpaid bills hidden in drawers, and scrolled aimlessly through online news articles. His heart stopped when he saw it. Elena Reinhardt welcomes heir to Steel Dynasty. The photo accompanying the article made his chest tighten. Elena stood in a navy blue gown, Adrian in her arms, surrounded by her powerful family. Her father's name, Augustus Reinhardt, was boldly printed in the article. Headlines gushed about the dynasty's future, the baby boy destined to inherit one of the greatest industrial empires in the world. Gregory read every word, his hands trembling. Heiress, dynasty, empire. Elena, the same woman he had divorced like she was nothing, was an heiress to billions. His mind raced, shame burning like acid in his chest. He remembered sneering at her quiet tastes, her reluctance to spend lavishly on frivolous luxuries, her preference for simple evenings at home instead of grand parties. He had assumed it was modesty, or even a lack of sophistication. He never realized it was strength. The kind of strength bred from knowing she didn't need to flaunt what was already hers. For days, Gregory couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The actress he had left Alina for had already drifted away, enticed by a famous director who promised her leading roles. She had walked out of his penthouse with a suitcase and a scornful laugh, leaving him with debt and humiliation. Now, as bankruptcy loomed, Gregory's mind fixated on Alina. He drove out to the Reinhardt estate, desperate for a glimpse. Guards stopped him at the gate. "You don't belong here, Mr. Alcott," they said firmly. He tried to argue, to insist he was Alina's husband, but the words turned bitter on his tongue. He wasn't her husband, not anymore. Inside, Alina was aware of his visit. A discreet message had been delivered to her. "Your ex-husband tried to gain entry." She had simply nodded, her expression calm. She expected this day would come. But instead of anger, she felt an odd pity for Gregory. Her life had changed so profoundly since his absence. With Adrian in her arms and her family beside her, she discovered a reservoir of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She attended board meetings with her father, learning the vast complexities of the steel empire she would one day oversee. Executives who once underestimated her now whispered about her sharp mind and unwavering composure. The tabloids that once painted her as a victim now praised her as a woman of resilience and dignity. Gregory's downfall became a spectacle. Newspapers reported on his failing businesses, his mounting debts, his lawsuits. The same society that once embraced him turned its back without hesitation. The actress who had glittered beside him now mocked him in interviews, portraying him as nothing more than a fool blinded by ambition. One rainy evening, Elena received a letter. The handwriting was familiar, shaky, as if written in desperation. "Elena, I was wrong. I see it now. I see everything I lost. Please, for the sake of our child, allow me to see him. I beg you." Gregory. She read the letter several times, her emotions conflicted. He was Adrian's father. For that reason alone, she couldn't ignore him entirely. But she would not allow him to walk back into her life as if nothing had happened. He had abandoned her at her most vulnerable, humiliated her publicly, and traded their vows for empty promises with another woman. Trust, once shattered, could not be pieced back together with a single plea. Still, after much thought, she agreed to meet him. The meeting was arranged in a quiet garden on the Reinhardt estate under the watchful eyes of security. Gregory arrived looking older, thinner, the arrogance gone from his features. When he saw Elena, his eyes filled with something between regret and awe. She stood poised, her long dark hair falling gracefully over her shoulders, a picture of power and serenity. Adrian, now a few months old, rested in a stroller nearby, watched over by a nurse. Gregory's voice cracked when he spoke. "Elena, you look different, stronger." She met his gaze without flinching. "Because I am." He swallowed hard, his pride breaking. I didn't know who you really were." Her lips curved into a faint smile, though it held no warmth. "And if you had known, Gregory, would you have stayed? Or would you have simply seen me as a prize to exploit?" He had no answer. Shame reddened his face. She continued, her tone steady. "I didn't keep my identity from you to deceive you. I wanted to be loved for myself, not my name, not my family's empire. You could have had that. You did have it. But you threw it away for a spotlight that has already burned you." His hands trembled as he reached forward slightly. "I can't undo the past. I can't undo what I did to you. But please, Adrian, let me be in his life." Elena studied him carefully. She saw the man who had once made her laugh, who had once held her hand and dreamed of a future together. She also saw the man who had abandoned her without hesitation, blinded by vanity and greed. "I will never keep Adrian from his father," she said finally. "But understand this, Gregory, you are not welcome in my life. You may see him, you may be a presence in his life, but do not mistake this for reconciliation. We are not husband and wife. That chapter is closed." His shoulders sagged with defeat, yet tears of relief filled his eyes. Thank you, Elena." She turned away, her gaze falling on her son, who slept peacefully in his stroller. Adrian was her future now. Gregory could play a role, perhaps even learn to be the father Adrian deserved. But Elena knew she no longer needed him. She had built herself anew, forged by betrayal and strengthened by truth. As Gregory left the estate that evening, escorted by security, he glanced back one last time. The sight of Elena standing tall, framed by the power of her dynasty, burned into his memory. He realized too late that he had discarded a jewel brighter than any stage light, a love purer than any fleeting romance. Elena, meanwhile, walked back inside, her steps firm. The world now knew her as the heiress of the Reinhardt steel dynasty, but she knew herself as something more: a mother, a leader, and a woman who had endured the fire and emerged unbroken. The future stretched before her, not defined by Gregory's betrayal, but by the empire she would one day guide and the child she would raise with strength and love. The world had tried to script her as the victim in a scandalous story. Instead, she had rewritten it into a tale of resilience, revelation, and triumph, and in that truth Elena found her peace.